So, as we know, it's the end of the school year, which means stress is kind of on everyone's mind. We have 1 week left of school, so let's talk about it. I have our academic advisor here, Randy Conoln, and Al Johnson, a student in broadcasting. So, first of all, I want to know what your personal experiences are with stress. We have both sides. You obviously advise students, and you are students. So, what do you guys experience right now this time of year?
Well, this time of year is a stressful time for students, especially students in their graduating year. But all students are kind of going through it, as I'll attest to, I'm sure, in a moment. They're worried about various things. First of all is attaining grades and getting good grades, but more importantly, getting through tests and assignments that all seem to be due at the same time. And because unlike high school, students are in different classes with different teachers who are in different departments, and everything culminates around the last week or two of school. So the stress level can get very high, and we, part of our job in academic advising is to assist students, and I'm sure we're going to get into that a little bit later, some of the strategies that we put together for students to help them manage their stress. College students also have a good percentage of our students also have part-time work. They're involved in relationships. Some of them are 17, 18, 19, and they're away from home for the first time. So it's not just the academic portion, although that is a big part of it. There's that sort of that whole package of factors that contribute to stress, and now we get into end of April and it comes to a head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agreed. What about you, Al?
I agree as well. Like, everything you just said is everything I've been stressing about. Having assignments, getting done on time, outside work. I am from 3 hours away from my actual home, so being homesick doesn't help at all. So having all that stress and then trying to make sure I keep up with grades and get everything in on the deadline, and if I'm in group assignments, not letting my group down. So it all just piles up at once, and it's a lot.
And I know you mentioned grades and tests and all that. Do you think there's a problem with us defining ourselves by a number? And I know you said there's a lot more to it than that, but is that kind of...
Well, I'll defer to Al how she feels about that.
Honestly, sometimes I'm like, oh my God, this number for a test or something, you don't pass or whatever. But I've also been told by a few professors, don't worry about the number, it's whether you can do it or not, because I'm someone that doesn't test well, but I can do the job still. Mm-hmm. But I'm just not good at memorizing information and relying it down on a paper for a test. I just don't have that kind of memory.
So, to answer your question about defining I think it's individualized. There are students who are very competitive, and that can be a good thing, depending again on their nature. And then I know my son's in grade 11, and he's super competitive, and he doesn't stress. He just wants to get the best mark he can, to be honest, to beat his friends. But at the same time, that for some people who aren't built that way, it can be very, very stressful, and it can actually be work against you. At the end of the day, I don't ever tell students, oh, just get the 50, of course. But in my experience in the world, not too many employers ask for a transcript. They want the diploma or the certificate or the degree, of course. But that's what's going to get your foot in the door. And then, of course, your own interview skills and so on, experiences are going to help you. So to put a whole lot of credence on an 80 or an 84 or a 75 or a 92, at the end of the day, my experience is that doesn't have a whole lot of weight to it.
Yeah, and there is a movement from grades don't matter, and there's also a movement of, we don't need an education anymore. We're in a new generation, and you don't need to go to college. You can start on your own. Do you guys think that that's true, or is that kind of a problem in itself?
I've come from a small town, and I've seen so many kids just not go to school right after high school or decide to take a year off, and that's okay. And some of them do go back to school after taking a few years off, but I've seen a lot of kids just get stuck in the same small town doing nothing, just living at home's okay. Like, I wish I lived at home so I would save some money and not stress about that, but some kids just get stuck for a long time in the loop of doing nothing. So that's why I went straight after high school.
Yeah. Well, you're posing that question to an educator, so certainly a year off can be a good thing. And I believe you yourself did it. And congratulations for returning to school, because quite honestly, oftentimes students don't. They get stuck in a rut, which I think is what I was alluding to. And then they're making what they think is money, but they're living at home and they don't have that many expenses. And $14 an hour is pretty cool when you're living at home. And then they meet someone and then they want to branch out on their own, maybe start a family, and it's not going to work. I mean, statistics will tell you that the more post-secondary education you have, the higher pay scale you're going to eventually reach. So, no, I don't believe in grade 12 is great. There was a time when not your parents, because your parents are my age, my parents could walk out of grade 8, grade 9, grade 10, go to General Motors. We were a General Motors town in St. Catharines, and one income, and do very, very well. Those days are over. I think that if you want to have a career, I think that post-secondary is very, very important. And I don't have any disillusions that one system, university or college, is better than the other. I think they both absolutely suit a specific need, depending, of course, on the individual.
And I think education is undeniably valuable, but I think a lot of people just take it because they feel like they have to. I think more people should consider who they are, what they want to be, because like you said, it's not so easy to get a job. So I think people just need to spend more time, finding their passion.
Yeah, that can be easier said than done, but you're right. And when we changed the curriculum in Ontario a few years back and we started pushing kids out of high school in grade 12 without OAC or grade 13, which is what I went through, it became even more difficult because now you have the late birthdays. You're born in November, you're 17, you're from Timmins, and you're moving to St. Catharines or Welland. Wow.
How do you know yourself at that age?
And the guidance counselors are telling you now in grade 10 and 11, you're making decisions, lifelong decisions, based on the curriculum that you select. So then a kid goes in, no disrespect, a young student goes into grade 11 and they take the U path because that keeps all their doors open, but maybe the college path was better for them, but there's so much pressure on them because colleges and universities use grade 11 marks in some cases to decide whether you get in. And it's just, I can't even imagine being young today. I'm not saying it was a whole lot easier. It just seems to me it was a lot easier when I was in high school. We did have that extra year. And in fact, many of us, not myself, but I had friends who actually did what we called grade 14. So they would stay, which you guys now call 12B,
yeah.
Or the Victory Lab. We would stay, some of us would stay for an extra year or semester. So now you're 19, almost 20. And the difference between 17 and 19 and 17 and 20, as you guys are finding out, I'm sure, is pretty big. It's a big gap. And the maturity level, from my experience, can be large. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, I mean, I did take a year off, and I try to tell people all the time, I love my education so much, and I wouldn't be who I am without it, but don't do it unless you, take the time to find yourself. Like you said, the year off, I've grown so much, and I learned so much about what I want to do and who I want to be, whereas if I just got into school and did whatever, I don't know if I'd be where I am. But like you said, there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of stress in school now. Is that valuable? And is stress necessary to be successful?
Can I go first on this? I think that stress is good, and I'll tell you why. It means you care. If you weren't nervous before you went into a test or an exam, I would be worried about you. It would mean that, in my opinion, that you just don't care. I'm a sports guy, so I teach academic and career prep here at the college, and the analogy I use with my students is if you were going into a big game and you weren't nervous, that's not good. You should have a little bit of nervous energy. Too much stress, of course. It's like I always liken it to that when I do a test taking seminar, and I tell students the longer you think about a question, the further you're pushing the answer away, because the stress keeps getting higher and higher. So I always, some of the advice we give them is skip that question and do the ones you know, and then come back to those ones. Same thing with stress. If you have too much stress, you may go blank. How do you avoid that? Well, there are a lot of, we could talk all day about it, but some of the tips that we give students, and also I teach, preparation, of course, is the number one. Preparation and time management. Poor time management, which your demographic, no offense, is famous for, or infamous rather, for, because there's a lot going on. But time management, but preparation, there's something that we call the memory curve. And so basically, if you go to a lecture, and half an hour after that lecture, you're going to remember about 90% of what we taught. The next day, if you don't review your notes, you're going to drop to about 10%. By the end of the week, you might go to about 2%. So what we tell students is, if you review your lecture for 10 to 15 minutes every day, that memory curve that line will plateau, and you'll retain everything. But I didn't do it as a student. You guys probably don't do that as students because you've never been taught that. So I'm hoping that more and more students will realize that for 10, 15 minutes a day, if you review you review everything, you're going to retain it a lot more than, which is the other side, is cramming, right? That's hard, because most of the time when you cram, you're going to remember what you studied at the beginning of your notes and at the end of your notes, and what's in the middle is where you're going to find difficulty. I know that's easy for me to say. I don't have to study anymore, but my job is to help you guys as students, the students that I see, try and relieve that stress. So to wrap it all up, your original point was, or question rather, was, is can stress be beneficial? Yeah, it absolutely can be, but too much stress can be detrimental, and then the panic button kicks in, right? So
Yeah, very much agreed. I find that if I'm overstressed, then I just feel like I can't do any of it, and I feel like I have no time. But sitting down and making a list of like what needs to go first and what to of importance, it feels good to be able to just cross everything off and like see it get done. So yeah, a little bit of stress is like, it motivates me to get stuff done, but sometimes if I have too much stress, I feel way too overwhelmed to actually finish any of it.
So just to wrap things up, how do you help students cope, and how do you specifically as a student cope with the stress?
I'll answer that in kind of two parts. As a department, I have just a little visual here. They've put together like a exam stress kit for students. It's nothing that's going to alleviate all of your stress, but there's a few things in here. Like we have a stress ball, and we have some free pizza and free coffee, and just some things to just help students feel a little bit better about what's going on. And as you'll see, like around the school, you'll see advertisements and posters for different things that we're doing. And then we also really try and encourage students to reach out to their academic advisors as well as their faculty. But students aren't used to that, especially first-year students. We have so many more services available to students at the college than the secondary schools do. And I think that, and it's not the fault of the secondary schools, it's more about funding, but I don't want to get into that. But at your high school, you remember your guidance counselor was everything. They were your personal counselor, they were your academic counselor. There's just no time for them. We have so many different services. We have our wellness center, right, for mental health issues. We have the academic advisors. We have academic drop-in sessions. We have peer tutors. And then, of course, the faculty and the faculty assistants. And there's just so many avenues for students to get help. And we try and promote it. But I think students should probably start with their academic advisor, because the academic advisors, if they don't know the answer, they absolutely know where the answer is in the building. So I think that's really important, and we have a really good team in our office. So I'll defer to you, Al.
The way I like to cope with stress is I have an amazing support system. It's a little hard because they are further away, but I'll call my mom, or I'll call my best friend, or even talk to my siblings who've done this before, and they help like bring me back to the main idea of why I'm here, what I'm doing it for, and help me realize it's going to be worth it. And I also rely on other things like working out, hanging out with friends to just relax for a bit, and making sure like I'm taking care of myself as well, because sometimes I forget to eat because I'm just so busy, or I don't get to bed till 12 p.m. at night, 1 o'clock, even later than that sometimes, or like you just need to take a moment and relax, but sometimes you just forget to do that stuff.
I'd like just to piggyback on what you're saying. I'm so glad you said what you did. Actually having a schedule and doing things at the same time every day and being structured can help you alleviate stress. And taking mental health breaks. Just getting, if you're you should not study for more than 40 to 50 minutes at a time without taking a break. Your brain is like a filing cabinet, and things just pile up, and as they go in, things exit back out. But you need some breaks, fresh air. I mean, we haven't had the greatest weather, but just going for a walk, and like you said, having something to eat. Like, don't go into an exam hungry. If you have an issue with a friend, that's just something you're having a little bit of conflict, resolve that before you sit down to study, because that's going to be eating away at you a little bit, and you're not going to have 100% focus. I mean, again, we're not here for hours, but there's just so many strategies and techniques that are, and you've touched on them, and that's great. And your support system, again, I just want to piggyback on what Al said, is really, really important, no matter who it is. And if it's your family, that's great. If it's your friends, if it's your significant other, whoever it may be, lean on those people, and know when to say no. You can't always say yes and all the time to everybody, because you have your own personal things to do, and sometimes people try and it's an admirable quality for sure, but it can be very stressful for sure, because you want to be there for everyone else, but then when you start doing that, things in your life start moving down that list, and that's not good.
Yeah, I know college can definitely sometimes feel like a bubble, and I think we learned a lot today to kind of cope and alleviate that stress. So I want to thank both of you for coming and having this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank
All the
you.
best to you both.
Thank you.